Hey, hello friends, and welcome to the first episode of the Flutter UI Design series on RetroPortal Studio. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at creating these two screens for a real estate app. The design inspiration for these screens was taken from a post from UIBucket on Instagram. The link for the post is in the description below. All the images that we're going to use in this project are taken from unsplash.com. The links for all these images can be found in the credits.txt file that you can also find in the project. So let's get started. Okay, so right now I'm in a blank Flutter project in which I have done a bit of a setup. You can see that in the lib directory I have this utils folder. In this I have these 4 files. So let's first take a look at what each of these files does. Let's start from constants.dart. In this you can see that on the top of this file I have these 4 constants. These constants are for each of the color that we're going to use in the application. You can see that we have a color black, color gray, color white, and color dark blue. Along with this, I also have this text theme default. This is an instance of class text theme. In this, I have described separate text styles for each of the heading from 1 to 6, along with body 1, body 2, subtitle 1, and subtitle 2. By describing these text styles in this theme, we don't have to write the text style for each of the text view that we add to the application, and we can just use the default text styles that we have for the whole application. One thing you can notice is that in body text 1 and body text 2, we have this property of height. The reason for adding this property is because body text 1 and 2 are going to be used in paragraphs. And in paragraphs, we want to control the height of each line. Along with this default theme, we also have this small theme that is called text theme small. This small theme is just the same theme with small font sizes. The reason for adding this theme is to control the font size of the application on smaller devices. We'll take a look at how we can choose the text theme according to device size in this main.dart file. But first, let's take a look at this custom functions file. Here you can see that I have a function called format currency, which takes in an amount and an optional parameter of decimal count. And also you can notice that I'm importing a package called intl.dart. I have added the package to the pubspec.yaml file, and this is really a great package for formatting strings, date and time, and so on. Also, I have the sample data. This sample data is a list of objects, and in each object we have properties such as image, amount, address, bedroom, and so on. And we're going to use this list to replicate the data that we actually get from the APIs. The next file is this widget_functions. In this you can see that we have 2 functions. One is add vertical space and the other one is add horizontal space. This add vertical space function takes in a height and it returns a sized box with that particular height. Same with the add horizontal space, which takes in a width and returns a sized box with the same amount of width. I have added all these files to make the process of creating UI a bit easy. Along with these files, I also have this assets directory in which I have fonts and images. For the fonts, I'm using the Montserrat font, and for the images, I have these sample images to use in the application. All the assets have also been declared in the pubspec.yaml file. So let's take a look at this main.dart file. In the build function of the My App, you can see that I'm getting the physical size of the device by using this window.physicalSize property. This window object is coming from the Dart UI class that I've imported in the main.dart file, and with the help of this we can actually get the physical width of the device in pixels. The reason we need this is because in the theme property we're giving it an instance of theme data. In the theme data, I'm giving the primary color of color white, the accent color of color dark blue, and for the text theme, I'm using this screen width, and if the width of the screen is less than 500, I'm using the text theme small, or else I'm using text theme default. Also for the font family, I'm using the Montserrat font by simply using the name that I've described in the pubspec.yaml file. Now that you know how the project is set up, let's take a look at creating those screens. We'll start with screen on the left. And the first thing that we have to create are these icon buttons. One thing you can notice is that all the icon buttons on this screen and the other one follow the same design. Along with the icon button, you can see that on the second screen there is house information, and in the house information there are different tiles, and each of the tile follows almost the same design as that of the icon button. From this we can plan is that if we create a separate widget for the icon button, we can reuse that in the favorite button and also in the house information. So let's create the base of the first screen and this custom icon button widget. Back in the app, the first thing that I'll do now is I'll go to the lib folder, and here I'll create a new folder and call it screens. In this screens folder, I'll create a new file called landingscreen.dart. In this landingscreen.dart, I'll create a new stateless widget and I'll name this landing screen. On the top of the file, I'll import material.dart And in the build function, I'll return a new scaffold. For the body of scaffold, I'll pass in a container, and for the width and height of this container, I'll go to the top of the build function, and here I'll create a new variable called size and put it equal to mediaQuery.offContext.size. We'll add the width and height to the container, and for the child of container, I'll add a column. I'll open the design on one side, and now that we have a base for the landing screen, let's add this to the main.dart file. For the home property, you can see that we have the landing page here, and I'll replace this with the landing screen. Now, for creating this custom icon button, I'll go to the lib folder again, and here I'll create a new folder, and I'll name this custom. And in this custom folder, I'll create a new file called border box. In the border box, I'll import material.dart, and I'll create a new stateless widget, and I'll name this border box. In the design of this border box, you can see that we have a child, and we also have some padding. Along with these two, we also have to give it a width and a height. So I'll come to the border box, and here I'll add the property of child. Along with child, I'll also add a padding, which is going to be an instance of edge insets. And along with this, I'll also add a property of width and height, which is going to be of type double. Now, let's create a constructor with all these properties. So I'll go to the height, and I'll click on Alt Enter. And here I get an option for create constructor for final fields. I'll click on this, and you can see that now we have a constructor with padding, width, height, and child. In all these properties, we want the child to be required, and I'll move it to the next line. Once this is done, I'll go to the container in the build function, and here I'll add the width and height. Along with this, I'll add the decoration property, and for this, I'll pass in an instance of box decoration. You can see that the background color of this icon is white, so I'll add the color property for the box decoration, and I'll set it to color_white. This color white is coming from the constants file in the utils folder, and for the next property, I'll add the border radius. For the border radius, I'll pass in border radius.circular, and here I'll pass in the value 15. Along with the border radius, I'll also pass in the property of border, and for the border, I'll pass in border.all, and here I'll pass in the color of color_gray, which is again coming from the file of constants. And for this color gray, I'll change its alpha with the function width_alpha, and here I'll pass in a value of 40. Along with this, I'll pass in a width that will be of 2. By the way, I'm not guessing the values for these properties because I've already made the project once so that I don't have to hit and trial while recording the video. Along with this decoration, I'll also add a padding property, and for the padding, you can see that the value is not compulsory for the constructor. So what I'll do is I'll add the padding, and along with this, I'll add a null check with double question mark, and if the value of padding is null, I'll create a new constant that will be of edge insets, and here I'll pass in the value of 8.0. Now, for the child of the container, I'll add the value of child, and I'll wrap this child with a new center. Okay, so now we have a custom border box that we can use in both of our screens. In this, we have a child property, and along with this, we have a padding property that is going to space this child nicely in the center of the widget, and the width and height property will help us to make this border box in whatever shape we want. Once the app runs, you can see that we have a blank screen right here. So I'll go to the landing screen, and here I'll wrap the scaffold with a safe area. Now when I save the app, you can see that now the app does not cover the area of the status bar. In the column, I'll add the children property, and in this, I'll add the first child of a row. We need a row here because we want two icon buttons on opposite ends of the screen. I'll add the children property of the row, and in this, I'll add the first child of border box. This border box is the widget that we just created. In this border box, I'll give it a width and height of 50 because we want this to be a square. Now, for the child property, I'll add an icon, and in the icon, I'll use the icon of icons.menu. With this, I'll pass in the color property and set its color to color_black. At this point, when I save the app, you can see that we have the icon button on top left of the screen. I'll copy this border box, and I'll add this as the second child of this row. For the second child, I'll change the icon to settings, but at this point, both these icon buttons are aligned to the top left corner of the app. For this, what we can do is for the row, we can add a new property of main axis alignment and set it to main axis alignment.spacebetween. With this, when I save the app, you can see that both the icons move to opposite ends of the screen. Now, in the original design, you can see that there is a nice space between the icons and the edges of the window. For this, what we can do is we can come up to the build function, and here, after the size, I'll add a new final variable that will be of type double, and I'll name this padding, and I'll put this equal to 25. Now, I'll come down to the row, and I'll wrap this with a new padding. For the padding, I'll replace this edgeinsets.all, and instead of all, I'll add symmetrical. And for the symmetrical, I'll add the horizontal padding and put it equal to padding. And because this padding is a variable, I cannot use this const keyword. The reason I've declared this padding in top of the build function is because you can see in the design, we have equal amount of space between the text, the icons, and all the other widgets on the screen. So it'll be easy to just use the padding variable instead of typing 25 every time. Next thing that we need to do is we need to come at the end of the padding, and here I'll add the add vertical space function, and this add vertical space function is coming from the widget functions in the utils folder. For the height, I'll use the value of padding, and now I'll add the text of city and San Francisco. First, I'll add the text of city using the text widget. Now, for the style property of text, we need to add the theme data that we added to the application in the main.dart file. For this, I'll go up in the build function, and here, after the size variable, I'll add a new variable that will be of theme data, and I'll put this equal to theme.offContext. Now, I can come down to the text, and here I can use theme data.textTheme, and for city, I'll use the text theme of body2. And at this point, if I save the app, you can see that the city is in the center of the screen. The reason for this is because by default, the cross-axis alignment of this column is in the center. So for this, I'll come up in the column, and here I'll add the property of cross-axis alignment, and I'll set its value to cross-axis alignment.start. Also, you can notice that there is no space between the icon buttons and the top of the screen. To solve this, what we can simply do is we can come to the column, and here we can add a vertical space. And for the vertical space, I'll pass in the value of padding. Now you can see that both the icon buttons have nice spacing around them, but the text here is touching the left edge of the screen. For this, what we can do is we can come down to the text widget, and I'll wrap this with a padding. And for this, we can pass the same value of padding as that of this row. So what I'll do is I'll take the edge insets from here, and I'll go to the build function, and here I'll create a new final variable, and I'll name this side padding, and I'll put this equal to edgeinsets.symmetric and give it the horizontal padding. Now what I can simply do is I can use this side padding as the value for padding for this row. I'll add the same padding to the text also, and now when I save the app, you can see that the text and the icon button are aligned properly. Now, in the same way, after the city, I'll add the text of San Francisco, and in this, I'm using the text theme of heading 1, and after this, I'll add the divider with same amount of padding. At this point, if I save the app, you can see that everything in the screen is perfectly aligned. One thing you can notice is that I'm giving the separate padding for each of the widget instead of giving the padding directly to the column widget right here. The reason for this is quite simple, so let's take a look at the design. In this, you can see that below the divider there are different filter options, and these filter options are scrollable. And if we add padding to the whole column, the padding will also be applied to the scroll view. And then when the user scrolls, the content of these filters will cut when they reach the padding. So just for the look and feel, I have added a separate padding for both the text widgets and this row. Now, let's take a look at creating these filter options. For this, I'll come below the divider, and here, I'll add the new widget of single child scroll view. For the scroll direction of the single child scroll view, I'll pass an axis.horizontal, because we want the filter options to be scrollable along the x-axis. Now, for the child of the scroll view, I'll add in a row. And for the children property, we have to create a design that we can use for each of the item in this filter. For this, I'll come down below, and here I'll create a new stateless widget, and I'll call this choice option. In this choice option, I'll create a single property of text. I'll click on text and click on Alt Enter, and now I'll create the constructor for this field. In the container, I'll create a new decoration property, and in this I'll pass in box decoration. We need a decoration here because we want to round the corners of this container. So first, I'll add the border radius property, and I'll give it a border radius of 20. Then, I'll add the color property to this box decoration, and I'll set the color to color_gray, and I'll set the alpha to 25. Along with this, after the decoration property, I'll add a padding property, and I'll give this container a horizontal padding of 20 and a vertical padding of 13. Next, I'll add the child property to this container, and for this, I'll add the text widget, and in this text widget, I'll pass in the text that we get in the constructor. Next, I'll pass in a style for this text, and for this style, I need to get access to the theme data. For this, I'll come up in the build function, and here I'll create a new variable called theme data and put it equal to theme.offContext. Now, I'll come back to the text, and here I'll use theme data.texttheme.headline5. Now what I'll do is I'll come up to the row, and here in this list, I'll add 4 different values for the filter. To adjust the spacing, I'll take this to the next line, and in the end, I'll use the map function of the list, and I'll rename this E to filter. As we map through each item in this list, we can simply return a choice option. For each choice option, we need a value of text, and for this, we'll simply pass in the value of this filter. I'll reformat the code, and I'll bring this map to the next line. Now at the end of the map, we want to return a list. So what I'll do is I'll use the toList function of the map, and now we have all the errors gone. So I'll bring up the emulator. You can see that we have all the filters on the screen and the list is scrollable. But at this point, there is no spacing between the filters. Now we can solve this problem in multiple ways, but the best way would be to give left margin to each of the item. With this, the very first item of the list will be aligned to all the other items on the screen. Let me show you what I mean. So I'll come down to the choice option, and here, just after the padding, I'll add the margin property, and for this, I'll pass in edge insets, and I'll use the only constructor of the edge insets, and here I'll pass in left and give it the value of 25. The reason I give it the value of 25 is to align it to the padding of all the other widgets. At this point, if I save the app, you can see that all the items of the filter have nice spacing between them, and the first item is aligned to all the other items on the screen. One thing we need to do is we need to add some spacing between the divider and the filters. For this, I'll come up to the row, and above the single child scroll view, I'll add a vertical space and give it a value of 10. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to create a list of available house options. For this, I'll come below single child scroll view, and here I'll add a vertical space of 10. Now, I'll create a new list view.builder, and in this we have the property of item builder. And in this item builder, we need to pass in a function which gets a context and an index. In the body of this function, we need to return a widget. At this point, I'll just return a simple text, and in this I'll write item. For the item count property of the list view.builder, I'll pass in redata.length. This redata comes from the sample data in the utils folder. And at this point, if I save the app, you can see that there is nothing on the screen. And if I take a look at the run window, you can see that there are a bunch of errors. Basically, what's happening is that list view is a scrollable widget, and it requires a fixed area to scroll through the items. But what's happening here is that we have a column for the whole screen, and the column can take infinite height. And because list view is the child of the column now, the list view does not have a fixed height to control its scrolling behavior. Well, there are many solutions for this, but what we'll do here is we'll wrap the list view with an expanded widget. What this does is that it gives the remaining space of this column to this list view. At this point, if I save the app, you can see that the text items are visible. Now, I'll wrap the list view with a new padding widget, and for the padding, I'll give it the same value of side padding. Now what we need to do is we need to take a look at creating this list view item. For this, I'll come down in the window, and here I'll create a new stateless widget, and I'll name this real estate item. In this, I'll create a new property of item data, and we'll also create a constructor alongside. And for this, the item data is required. Next, in the builds function, I'll add a new variable of theme data. And in the container, I'll add a new child property of column. We want a column here because we want the items to be aligned in a vertical fashion. So the first item is going to be an image view, and that image view has a favorite icon on the top right hand corner. For this, I'll add the children property of this column, and here I'll pass in the first child of stack. And here for the first child, I'll add image.asset. And now we need to get the path of this image from this image data, and we can simply do it like this. The next thing that we need to do is we need to add a positioned widget, and this positioned is to add the favorite icon on top right hand corner of this image. So for the positioned, I'll add in the child of border box, and this is the widget that we created for the top icons. For the border box, I'll pass in the child property, and here I'll pass in icon. For the icon, I'll pass in icons.favorite border, and for the color of icon, I'll pass in color_black. Now, just to take a look at it, let's bring back the emulator, and I'll come back to the list view, and here instead of the text, I'll pass in real estate item, and for the item data, I'll pass in redata, and to this I'll pass in the index. At this point, if I save the app, you can see that the items do appear, but we need to format them according to our design. So what I'll do is I'll come to the real estate item, and I'll give this positioned a top and right property. For the top, I'll pass in 15, and for the right, I'll also pass in 15. And also for the border box, I'll give it a width of 50 and a height of 50. You can see that the border box icon appears on the top right of the image. Now what I'll do is I'll wrap the image with a new widget, and this widget is going to be clip or rect. We need this clip or rect to clip our image with a border radius. For this, I'll add a border radius property to the clip or rect, And for this, I'll pass in a border radius of 25. At this point, if I save the app, you can see that the design looks good. Next thing that we need to do is we need to add some space between the items. For this, what I'll do is I'll add the margin property to this container. And for this, I'll add a vertical margin of 20. Now, let's take a look at design for a moment. Here, what we need to do is we need to add a price text, and just after that, we need to add the address. So here, we need to add a row to align these items. I'll bring back the emulator, and just after the stack, I'll add a new vertical space and give it a height of 15. Next, I'll add a row widget, and in this row, I'll add the children property, and here, I'll add the text widget and give it the text of item data's amount. I'll also add the style property for this text, and I'll give it a value of themedata.texttheme.heading1. At this point, if I save the app, you can see that the amount appears but not in the correct format. For this, what we can do is we can use the format currency function, and for the amounts, we can pass in the value of item data amount. You can see that the amount is formatted with a comma, and a $sign is added as the prefix of the amount. This format currency function comes from the custom functions in the utils folder. For the second child of the row, I'll add in a text with item data address, and I'll give it a style of theme data, text theme, and a style of body text 2. In between these texts, to add a bit of space, I'll add a horizontal space of 10. You can see that both the text widgets are properly aligned. Just after the row, I'll simply add a new vertical space and give it a value of 10. And after this vertical space, I have added a new text with the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, and the total area of the house. Also, I've given it a style of the heading 5. And at this point, you can see that the text in the second line appears in the center of the screen. For this, what we can do is we can come up to the column, and here we can add the property of cross-axis alignment, and we can set it to cross-axis alignment.start. I'll save the app, and the screen is almost ready. Now to create this bottom button, I'll come up to the custom folder here, and I'll create a new file, and I'll name this option button. In this file, I'll import the material.dart, and now I'll create a new stateless widget, and I'll name this option button. As you can see that in the button we have an icon, a text, and we need to give this button a particular width. For this, what I'll do is I'll add 3 properties to this option button. One will be the text, the second is icon, and the third is the width. Along with these, I'll add a constructor, and in the builds function, instead of this container, I'll return a flat button. Now, for the minimum width of this button, I'll pass in width. For the color, I'll pass in color dark blue, and I'll import this color from the constants file. To give this flat button with rounded corners, what I'll do is I'll use the shape property, and here I'll pass in rounded rectangle border, and for this I'll pass in a border radius, and I'll give it a value of border radius.circular with a radius of 50. Next, I'll pass in the padding property, and I'll give this button a horizontal padding of 20 and a vertical padding of 15. And for the child of this flat button, I need to add in a row. So the reason we need to add a row here is because we want the icon and the text to appear along the x-axis. So for this row, I'll add in the children property, and here for the first child, I'll add in an icon. In this, I'll pass in the icon that we get in the constructor, and for the color of this icon, I'll pass in color_white. After this icon, I'll add some horizontal space, and for the third child of this row, I'll add a new text with the value of text that we get in the constructor, and for the style of this text, I'll pass in a text style, and for this, I'll give it a color of color_white. Now, I'll come back to the landing screen. To get this button at this particular position, we need to wrap the whole screen in a stack, and then add this button as the second child of the stack. For this, what I'll do is I'll come to the top of the landing screen, and here, I'll select the column, and I'll move to the end of the column, and from there, I'll select the complete column widget. Now, I'll cut this column, and instead, I'll pass in a stack. Now, for the children property of the stack, I'll pass in the first child of this column, and for the second child, I'll pass in a positioned widget. Now, for the child of the positioned widget, I'll pass in the option button that we just created, and in this option button, I'll pass in the icon that will be of icons.mapRounded. For the text, I'll pass in mapView, and for the width, I'll pass in size.width into 0.35, which is equal to 35% of the width. And at this point, if I save the app, you can see that the map view appears, but it is at the top of the screen, and it's taking the full width of the screen. To solve this, what we can do is we can come to the positions, and here I'll add in the bottom property and give it a value of 20, and I'll also give this positions a value of width, and for this I'll pass in size.width. I'll save the app, and you can see that the map view moves to the bottom of the screen. To fix this issue with the width of the button, what we can do is we can wrap the option button with a center widget, and now we can move to the option button and we can wrap the flat button with a new container. And here we can pass in the width property and pass in the width. We can also remove the min width from the flat button, and now if we save the app, you can see that the map view appears in the center of the screen. At this point, if we click on the button, there's no ripple effect. For this, what we can do is we can add a splash color to the flat button, and here I'll pass in color_white dot width alpha, and I'll pass in the value of 55. I'll save the app, and now if I click on the button, you can see that there is a ripple effect on the flat button. With this, the first screen of our UI is complete, but when I scroll to the list, the scrolling is not smooth. For this, I'll come back to the landing screen, and here I'll come down to the list, and to the list view.builder, I'll add a physics property, and I'll pass in bouncing scroll physics. I'll pass in the same for the single child scroll view, and now if I save the app, you can see that when I scroll through the list, the scrolling is smooth with a nice bounce effect. The same thing happens for the filters on the top. And with this, the first screen of our UI is complete. With this series, my goal is to help you in creating beautiful UIs in Flutter, and the best way to learn to create UI is to create it yourself. Of these two screens, I have created the first screen, and in this we have created some reusable widgets such as these icon buttons and this bottom map view button. With these widgets and the hints from the first screen that we created, it will be easy for you to create the second screen yourself. Code for both the screens will be in the Git repository, the link for which is in the description below. So if you find yourself stuck at any point, you can check out the code, but first try doing it yourself. As this was the first video in the series, let me know if you have any suggestions for this series in the comment section below. And if you find this video useful, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more Flutter videos coming your way. See you next time. Peace.